Okay.
Kita Pak.
All right. Can see my screen?
Oh, okay kan? Everyone can?
Okay. Awesome. Let me just do the presentation over here. All right, guys. All right.
Okay.
Very good afternoon, guys, and happy weekend. We're gonna do a class about how to use the AI for software development today. I mean, I know the official title is about practical use of AI for software dev, but it's almost the same thing. Right. So let me tell a little bit about myself first before I continue on with my class. Um, so in total, I have about a decade of experience in AI, in software development. I've done a lot of freelance projects as well, which I can indulge in a bit later. I also done a lot of personal projects that are in my GitHub. It's you can always go and take a look at it. There are like more than 50 personal projects that are over there. One of the notable thing that I've done in my career life is that I've also freelanced for a bunch of companies, and one of the company is a US based medical company. Again, I can talk about that a little bit more later. I've worked for both corporates and startups. Mostly startups, only one corporate, Salcom DG, for 2 years. And I've also published 2 AI research papers for my master's endeavor. And among that time that I was in a startup, I was also a CTO in one of the startup for 1 year. Right now, I'm working for a London company. It's a startup based in London, but the people are everywhere from the world. We have people from Uganda, we have people from Turkey, we have people from Belgium, Norway, me, Malaysia, India, Pakistan, and Vietnam. So that's the company that I'm attached to right now. It's called Hit AI. You can take a look at my LinkedIn. All right, glad that everyone can see and hear. Right, so that's a little bit about myself. Now, the thing that I'm going to talk to you guys about today is more from my perspective, all right? So I'm not gonna talk about something that's already been on the internet or something that we can see in the news or things like that. I mean, sure, it's influenced by those a little bit, but I'm gonna try and keep it as much as possible from my own perspective and not be biased by anything else that's happening out there in the world, right? So my perspective comes from a little background, comes from my background, right? Which is what I just mentioned, but I'll mention in depth right now. So I started my career in 2017. I started with internship, and then I joined as an AI engineer in a startup company. Now, bear in mind, prior to 2017, I've already been doing some codings, although it wasn't for any jobs. It was more of a hobby. So that's the era when AI is starting to emerge, and people were putting more attention to AI. And most of the time, I suppose it's on chatbots and on computer vision stuff. And the chatbots back then is very, very limited, so it's more towards the computer vision, that if I could recall correctly. And I joined in as an AI engineer mainly on computer vision as well in 2017. And then in 2022, which is like 5 years in the future, I had already worked for multiple freelance jobs and also the full-time job that I was mentioning. I was also doing some part-time jobs here and there, and I was also doing some teaching for free in a community called DEFCON. That was quite long back ago. And some of the notable freelance project that I've did back in before to 2022 is that I worked for a self-driving car prototype. I worked for a project by TNB, a prototype for Petronas company, and a few other things. Most of them are paid, and most of them are prototype based. It wasn't actually like in a production setting yet. But that gave me different perspectives from different industry, right? I mean, we had this self-driving car, and then I was working in the fashion industry, and then I was also getting these jobs from the TNB, the piping, and the Petronas, which is the oil and gas. It's more towards the safety part, but it's also can be considered as a different industry altogether. So that was until 2022, and then in 2023, that's when I completed my CTO tenure 1 year, and that's when I also finished my freelance job for the US medical startup company. Now that freelance job was the longest I've ever had. It was a 1 year project, um, and the team was very small. It was like maybe about 5 or 6 of us. I got to work with a lot of experts. Like one of them is an expert pediatrician. Um, so the job was about detecting some kind of allergy in babies. All right. So to be more specific, it's a cow milk protein allergy. It only occurs on children's below 1 year and below, and the way for you to detect that is quite complicated. There's no biomarker samples that you can use to detect that allergy. The only way they detect is using clinical trials, which is kind of inhumane if you think about it, because they have to give them the stuff that they were allergic to see their reaction, and they wanted a better approach, and that's where I came in, and the company actually came in and they hired me, and it was a 1 year project, and we managed to do it successfully. So I learned quite a lot from the medical industry on how your softwares need to be, what you can't do and what you can do, what kind of um, rules and regulations that you need to follow, and things like that. So that was in 2023. In 2024, I finished my 2 years experience in Southcom VG, and I joined a startup back in Puchong, and now I am in a different startup again. I'm like I said, I'm attached to a London-based company. It's called HidAI. Now we're doing analysis for boxing, MMA sports, any kind of combat sports actually. Yeah, so that's my journey. And in this 2017 to 2026, I've come across so many different industries, and I've also been in the era where AI wasn't very prominent, and also the era where AI is now basically everything, right? I guess the shift kind of happened in the middle, like 2022, 2023, 2024. And I've seen so many changes in the industry, pre AI and post AI, right? So that is what I'm going to give you guys today, basically from my own perspective. It could be biased, but I hope it's somewhat helpful to you guys, right? Now, let's talk about software development a little bit before we go into how to use AI into the software development, right? Now, the way I like to think about software development is that it's more similar to writing a story, all right? I'm an avid story reader, so it helps me to think about it like that. Now, I'm pretty sure you guys watch movies as well, and maybe some of you read storybooks or short stories or something like that. And if you do that, you will be able to see a lot of similarities between writing codes and writing a story. Now, in a story, you plan before you write anything, right? It's just because you know how to write English doesn't mean you can write a good story, or you can write a poem, or you can write some report. Same goes with this. Just because you are very good at some programming language like Python, C++, or whatever, doesn't mean you can write good software, right? There's more towards software than just writing codes, and there's more towards a story than just writing English. All right, even though your grammar, punctuation, everything is like godlike. All right. So first thing in story is that you need a story. All right, you need a plan on what's going to happen, what you want to convey, what's the kind of objective that you want to give to your audiences, and so on. And then second thing is you need to identify the characters and motives. Same thing here in software. For the first point, which is the planning, is you need to gather the requirements from your client. Now, the software is almost always for a client, right? Unless you're building some OS or what, that's a different story. But most of the time, 99% of the time, the software that you're going to be writing is for a client from a different industry, right? For example, if you're working for, like, let's say the Celcom VG, The software that you write is for telecom clients. They have certain use cases, and you have to adopt to that to be able to write the software to that use case. So that's the plan part comes in, and also the characters and motives. You need to know who are your users and what are their motives. What are they going to be using it for? For example, if you're developing a bank app, your users are common people, and they're going to be using the bank app to transfer money, to invest, um, and to pay here, to pay for vendors. Maybe they set up their own business and things like that. And then you also have the other part of the story, which is the bank itself. So the bank itself is also a user, and they want to manage their users. They want to manage the finances. They might be doing some investing. So you need to cater to all of this. You need to identify all of these characters, their motives, and the entire plan. And then you have the plot and the flow, basically, right? When you write your software, you need a flow. For example, if you're logging in into the Facebook, you have the first page, which is the login page or the sign up page, and once you log in, you have the home page, and then from the home page you can go see other people's posts, you can go see the comments, and then you can also go to the groups, right? You can also go to the groups, and then you can upload your own story, you can go to your own profile. So there's flows to it that the users can choose, which is the same as in a story. You need a flow. Even though your story is really good, but there's no flow, there's no point to it, right? And then obviously it must be readable. What I mean by that is, you could write a really good story, but if you are writing it in a way that only you understand it, then how is everybody else is going to read it, right? It's kind of a moot. The point is not there. Same goes with the software. If you write a software that only you understand, then there's no point, because there's going to be, when you're working in corporates or when you work in even in a startup, there's going to be other people who reads your codes, who test your code, who use your code in some way. If you're writing it in a non-readable way, that's gonna suck, right? So far we have gone until the flow part. So now this part is a bit diverging, but let me tell you what I meant by that sixth point. Right. So the way that you write your story, especially if you're writing a very, very huge story, you need to be able to write it in a way that you can modify certain events in the middle based on your ending or based on how the feedback goes and whatever, right? Now that doesn't mean you want to change the entire story or entire flow. For example, maybe there's this certain paragraph where your character does something, you just put it there to see if it fits to the ending or not, and maybe you found out that it doesn't fit. Now you have to go and remove that paragraph. Now the way you want the entire story to be written is that all the paragraphs are related, but they are not tightly coupled, meaning that this paragraph does not entirely depend on another paragraph, and so on. So if you do it that way, you're gonna have a lot of problems modifying your story. The same goes with the code. If you write everything in a way that it's bundled up and it's kind of tightly coupled together, you won't be able to change the features when the time comes. For example, if suddenly the bank app, the bank customer or your client is asking you, okay, we are not only going to go to the MYR, we want to also take care of USD. And now you have to go back and change the whole feature. And if you hard coded everything to only take care of the MYR, now you have to go and hard code for USD. And later, if they want to take a different currency into the consideration, like a SGD, now you have to do it for SGD. So you want to write your code in a way that this currency is not tightly coupled, meaning that it's in a way that you can just add in another currency later on or remove the currency later on, right? So these are some of the important points in the software development, and the biggest one is bugs, or as in the story context goes, plot holes. Now I'm pretty sure you guys have watched Stranger Things, which is the latest season in Netflix, right? So now just taking an example out of there without spoiling anybody. If you guys notice, there's some of the characters there um, had gone through some disabilities, but then in the end, the episode, the disabilities were just gone. So there was a plot hole error over there. Now, it can happen to story, and it can also happen to software developments, right? In software development, it's kind of unforgiving. When you have bugs, it's gonna be quite catastrophic, right? In stories, it can also be that way, but people can overlook that. Now, the point is, with the bugs, your software can still run until the time comes when you discover the bug. All right, we'll go through this later more, but it's very similar to the stories that you are writing. Your stories can have plot holes. Now, those are the logical errors, the continuity errors, and so on. Same thing with your codes, you can have all these errors as well. All right. Now, this is why I like to think about software development as something like writing a story. And knowing all this now, I would say that the software development consists mostly of planning, right? Planning and research. The execution part, basically the writing of the code part, is quite small compared to the rest. When you're working with clients that are quite difficult, you have to, especially those that are quite difficult, you have to sit down with them, get all the requirements, and do research for what they want and what they don't want. It's not one time or two time that I faced a client where they ask me a certain requirement, and once I've done with the code, I'm quite excited, right? Because I have this project, so I do the code, and then I give it to them. They say, no, this is not what I expected. So that's kind of happens like 80 or 70% of the time, even now. And most of the time, it can be boiled down to the fact that there's a lot of misunderstandings when it comes to the technical terms. And also the expectation itself, really. And trust me, it's not getting better. Now with all this AI out there, the expectation is just getting more and more blown up. So this is your chance to actually be good at that managing expectation part. All right, so that's a little bit about the software development. Now let's do a little bit of case studies here, okay, to see where things have went wrong in the past. All right, so in 1999, NASA sent a rover to Mars atmosphere, right? And now this rover, what happened was, the moment it reached Mars atmosphere, it just burned down because it got their trajectory wrong, or the speed or something got it wrong. And when they did some analysis study on what went wrong, turns out they hired two different software development companies, and one of the software development company were using the imperial unit, right? The imperial unit, such as like dozen, pound, feet, things like that. And then the other one was using metric, such as like this meter, kilometer, kilogram, and things like that. So they didn't take into consideration that they need to do some conversion before they put both of the software together. And then what happened was, when the spacecraft was about to enter the atmosphere, one of the software was giving in the different unit, the other one was giving in Newton unit. Then when you were doing the calculation over there, the things got overblown and the trajectory just went completely missing. And that's why the spacecraft had a different velocity that caused it to burn in the Mars atmosphere. Just like that, it was gone. $1 billion project because of very small error, right? So that was the first case study, and the second one is my favorite one because it happened during my time. Now during the COVID, there were so many different papers that came out, and bear in mind, these are all from prestigious universities like Oxford. Some of them were from MIT, and I've also seen some from Meta, few very named companies, right? So they all came out with these papers saying that they have this AI that could detect the COVID infection by just looking at CT scan image. And then turns out there were data leakage. What I mean by that is, okay, so all these people, they claim that they have like about 95 to 99% accuracy to detect, right? So what they did, these clinical practitioners, they took this model to try and figure out if what they claim is actually true or not. So when they did it, turns out the chance or rather the accuracy was way below 50%, which is basically just a random coin toss at that point. So what went wrong was that all this data that people were using to train the ML model were from the same hospital, right? And the same hospital had an issue where um, when a person has COVID, they are likely to be more having a breathing problem. So they were lying down when they were taking the CT scan. And those who don't have COVID, they were sitting up straight when they were taking the CT scan. So what the difference between these two scans were very, very subtle, but the AI picked it up. So the AI thought like, okay, if this person is sitting up, then there's no COVID. If this person is lying down, then there's COVID. So that's the kind of relationship that it came to conclusion with. And then there's also this another issue where they were taking this data from multiple different hospitals, but there were some major hospitals, right, where people always go for COVID, and then there were like very less hospitals. So turns out these different hospitals has a small difference in their font that they used in one of their CT scan, right? So the AI kind of learned that okay, if this font is the one that appears, then there's no COVID. If it's another font, then there's COVID. So on the test data, it performed exceptionally well, 99%. But when we put it in real world, it didn't work. And that was one of the major catastrophe that happened during that time. I'm not sure if any lives were lost. We don't have any data for that. I hope that they caught this problem in the testing phase itself. But we might never know. Maybe there were some clinics or some doctors used it, trusted it, and something bad happened. But I hope not. So that's the kind of issue that can arise if you're not very careful with your software. It doesn't matter if it's an AI software or if it's a normal mobile app or web app or whatever. So like very small things can cause this kind of issue. And then the last case study would be the Ariane 5. This was well, I believe this was also in the 90s. Now what happened here was there were already another flight called Ariane 4, and the developers were quite confident that the software that worked in Ariane 4 can also work in Ariane 5. So they took this 64-bit floating point of the speed, and then they changed it to 16-bit integer. And again, they did this based on the previous model's behavior, right? Previous Ariane 4 flight behavior. And then what happened was there was an integer overflow that happened during the calculation, and the flight kind of veered off the trajectory by a lot. And luckily, they had a fail-safe implemented inside them, saying that okay, if it goes beyond this particular speed, just self-destruct. And that's what happened. Before it went into critical residential zones, it self-destructed. Luckily, there was no lives lost. But imagine a $1 billion project just go kaboom like that, just because you made a error with the 64-bit and the 16-bit floating point errors, right? Now, believe it or not, that kind of error still happens today, and that's what we're going to be seeing now. Now, I believe that most of you here are programmers, and you guys will be having a field day with this if you haven't heard about this before. So here we have 3 different examples, right? So the first one, let me see if I can. All right, so this is the first one. Now you guys can follow along with me if you want to, and for those of you lazy people who just want to see the result, I'll show you guys, so don't worry about it. All right, so here you go, but let me just explain a little bit of the code. So you have a total variable which is declared to 0, and then here you have a loop that goes 10 times. All right, and each time I'm adding 0.1. So mathematically speaking, your total now should be 1.0, right? Because you added it 10 times, correct? And this should print true, right? Does anyone disagree with me? If you guys disagree with me, you can either turn on your mic and talk, or you can just put it in the chat. Alright, seems like there's no disagreement at all. Alright, I'll show you guys what happens with this one. Alright. Oops, there's someone typing. What is the underscore mean? Okay, the underscore basically just a placeholder. You can always just put I over there. It doesn't really matter. I put underscore because in Python, when you put underscore, it means that variable is useless. You don't want to use that variable later on. It's just a convention. Just for you to know, you can also put I. Alright, so let's try it. So that's my terminal. Just gonna. So that's the name of the file, and you can see that it's 0.99999 instead of 1.0 that we were talking about. And this check over here, let me just try to make it bigger. Alright, so the check over there returned false. So you see, this is what happens when you try to do arithmetics with floating point integers. And the reason why it happens is because your computer has very finite bits, and they have to do their best to represent this kind of floating points using that bits that you have. 64-bit architecture for your CPU processor would be a bit more accurate than 32-bit. But that doesn't mean the 64-bit doesn't do mistakes, right? Now this is what happens. Again, you can go figure out why this happens more in depth later on your own. But for now, just know that when you're working with decimals, things don't always work as you think they would. Okay. Now let's go with the second one. Alright, so the second one is kind of similar, but here we have some comparisons being made. So we have the first one, which is like the total just now, and then we have a step. Now what we're doing over here is, while your dose is less than 100.0, you're just going to keep on adding it. Add, and we are just adding 0.1 over here. Very small steps, okay? Now what should happen is, once it comes exactly at 100.0, this while loop should stop, and this should print out 100.0. This should be true, and the alarm should be printed. Correct? Now let's try to see what happens. Oops, now you see, instead of becoming 100.0, it became 100.0.999999895. Now that's very close to 100.1. And if you're working in critical industries like medical industry or some sort of chemical plant where you have to add two different chemicals together based on the calculations, where you have to add a certain dosage of medicines to a patient, or even when you're working in industries like self-driving car, these can be very fatal. Now what we are dealing with here are small numbers, right? Like 100, 0.1 and things like that, so they can become, and even then they become quite noticeable. Now imagine if you're working with numbers like millions or numbers like billions, then this part becomes way more noticeable. You expect maybe 11.1 million, but then it becomes 11.3 million. So if you're working with like bank apps, you're gonna be having a lot to answer to your clients later on when things go wrong, when they were getting some losses but they were actually not getting losses. See, this kind of things happens, right? So you gotta be very careful with this floating point errors. And then we have the third one. Okay, this one is one of my favorite as well. It looks very straightforward. See, 0.1 plus 0.3 and then 0.2 plus 0.2. So this should be 0.4, 0.4, and both of them should be true. And then we have this one, 0.1, 0.2, 0.3, where this should equal to 0.6, and both of them should be 0.6, 0.6, and this should be true also. Now let's see what happens. There you go. So the first one becomes true, but the second one goes false, right? See, this is again what happens when you are quite unlucky with things. The bigger the number, as in the floating point number, the higher the chance for you to get it wrong. So maybe when you're writing your software, you get lucky, right? You do 0.2 plus 0.2 and then you get 0.4, you are happy with it. So you go ahead and make a more complicated kind of program with all the different floating point arithmetics. Now when you do that, things in a subtle way starts adding up that you don't realize, and in the end result will be very catastrophic for you. And like I said, you are lucky if you're not working in some critical sector industry, like if you're working for some I don't know, like maybe a facial recognition software which is not for crucial security, or if you're working for a website that calculates people's weight or something like that. Sure, this kind of issues are tolerable, but again, if you're working for critical industries like self-driving car and things like that, you might be the cause of a person's life or so. Alright, so you don't want that to happen. Now there are solutions to this issue, but I don't want to give you the solutions for that, because I'm not here to teach you about how to about how to do arithmetics with the floating point issue. I'm just trying to show you these problems and how it could occur when you're using your AI later on. Alright, so you can go ahead and find your own solutions for this, but I'll give you a clue. It's called tolerance. TOLERANCE. Let me just write it up here. Alright, so that's the keyword that you should search for. Okay. Okay, so now that we have seen something a little bit about software development and how things can go wrong, let's see how AI fits in here. Now, like I said, I've been through that era before AI and also after the AI boom happened, right? So there's a lot of transition that happened in the middle, and there's a lot of debates that are going on. Like, some people think that this is going to take your job, some people think no, AI is already superior, some people think no, not yet. Now what I'm trying to say to you guys here is, use the AI to become a better engineer. Alright, don't put AI aside. Don't buy into that narrative when people say that don't use AI at all for programming. No, I think you should use it, but don't rely on AI to do everything. Okay, now I'll tell you what AI exactly does in this kind of new era of software development here. What it firstly does is that it really speeds up your routine coding. What I mean by routine coding is that, see, before this AI thingy all happened, let's say I want to do a project about machine learning, right? I want to train a model. What I have to do is that every time I create a new project, or every time I work on a new project, I have to use the old projects, modify the template, and then I put in the logics that are pertaining to this new use case, and then I start training the model. But now, after the AI has happened, I don't need to do that anymore. All I ask is the AI to do the template for me. I obviously will tell the AI what to do, what kind of template I'm looking for, and then the AI does it for me. Now, this kind of routine coding just makes things way faster, like probably 5-10 times faster. The second thing is, it helps me to understand unfamiliar concepts. Like, for example, recently I've been into learning Rust language, RUST, if you guys are familiar with it. Now, it's a low-level language, and it's quite hard to learn Rust compared to Python or even C++ in some regards. So there's a lot of new concept that comes along with Rust, and you have to learn it well before you can do the coding. Especially the borrow checker. So Rust works in a way that once you use a variable in some function, you can't use that variable anymore unless you do some memory allocations for it. So it takes care of that. It doesn't have a garbage collector, and at the same time, it also takes care of the memory management by itself. So it's kind of a unique programming language, and there was a lot of difficulty that I had to face before I can create a project in Rust. See, before AI happened, the way I would have gone with this is that I would have downloaded the book, I would have read the book, and then I would have do some simple projects before I get good at it. It takes very step-by-step kind of way to do it. But now, all I have to do is just read a little bit about. I just read half of the book, right? I didn't complete the book. I just knew enough, right? And then I went and did some simple projects, and straight away I could do some complicated projects. And obviously, I don't rely on AI to do everything for me, but I use AI to help me to understand the concepts, the design patterns, and so on. Now, again, AI can also be used as an improvement to your software engineering practices, like your design pattern, like your readability. What I mean by readability in the code is that a lot of people don't have the habit of naming the variables properly, so you can use AI to do that, but just that, okay? And please don't give the entire code base to the AI and ask it to refactor or readable and make it readable. It's gonna mess up somewhere. So the best way is to just give it module by module, and then you go from there. Okay. You can also use AI to generate some unit tests, which will be very, very helpful if you are just if you're just a beginner in this kind of testing your software. All right. So that's how AI is used in my daily application or my daily life at least. And these are the things that you should not do with AI. Okay. Now, I've seen so many juniors in my companies that when I ask them to do something, they just go do some prompt engineering. They just give their AI to generate the whole code, and then they just submit it to me. They don't even take the time to test it. Now, I'm not saying that it's bad to generate the whole code over there, but I am saying it's bad when you generate the whole code over there and you have no idea what's going on. Alright? Now, what I would recommend is to generate module by module, but we would get to that later. But the reason why I'm asking you guys to not generate the whole code is because if it works, you don't know why it works. If it doesn't work, you also don't know why it works. Basically, you're not doing anything. You're just a middleman. You're not an engineer, right? So you can't possibly hope to become a good engineer if all you do is just that. All you do is just prompt engineering something and then giving it up, and then prompt engineering again when an error comes. Basically a wipe coder, right? So don't do that. The second thing is challenge the AI always. When it gives you some sort of code, ask it why this was done, why not another way. Ask it to justify its own decision. And a lot of times, it doesn't matter whether the code is correct or not, you will learn a lot from that practice itself, right? So when it justifies why it does it certain way and not the different way, you'll be able to know, oh, okay, cool, this is how you should do things, not that the other way. So you also challenge your own thinking, your own beliefs, and your own knowledge as well. All right, so do that. And the third most important one, don't leave any critical logics like the one that we were talking about earlier, like the case studies about the floating point errors and about the imperial metrics and also the metric systems. Don't leave those kind of critical logics to AI. Always triple check, forward check if you are using AI anyways. And also the safety related codes. Remember that part when Ariane 5 had an issue with its speed because of that 16-bit floating point error, and then it self-destructed. See, that self-destruction is a safety related issue. I mean, it's a kind of like a fail-safe, right? Now what they did is that, okay, if the speed reaches above this certain limit, just self-destruct so that people don't get caught up in this kind of blast or something. So the same thing in your code. You need to have safety checks everywhere. For example, if you're doing some sort of calculations between um maybe finance app, right? Maybe a bank app. You're doing a calculation on how much interest that you should give to a person. Every once in a while, you should have a check saying that, okay, if the interest goes above 20%, print a warning or check what's the issue, right? So you should have those kind of safety fill nets, so that if something actually goes wrong, it doesn't go all the way through. All right. Now those kind of safety related codes, you don't leave it to AI, because AI is most probably gonna screw up that as well. All right. So don't do that. It's far too important for you to just give it up to AI just like that. Now the whole point of this entire thing is that you are the one who should understand the domain and requirements, not AI. Okay, so when you get a project from a client, you are the one who should question the client, elicit the requirement as much as possible, make a plan, and then you use AI to help out with those things, like checking the logics of the code, or like I said, generate the boilerplate code and things like that. If the AI got it wrong at the end of the day, that's your fault. Okay, you just need to remember that. You as a software developer, everything is your responsibility. It doesn't matter what tool you use. AI is just a tool at the end of the day. All right. Okay. Now I'll maybe indulge a little bit on how I use AI for my projects. So, recently I was doing a financial project, and obviously I had to go through the those floating point errors again, and yeah, so there was a lot of things that I learned on that, and I'm just gonna use that project as like a reference when I'm talking about this. All right. So the first thing that I did, again, I did that using Rust. Okay, and Rust is something that I've been learning for less than 6 months or 8 months. So I'm not 100% confident with my ability in Rust, as there are a lot of things that I still need to learn. But it was the whole project was done because I wanted to learn about the Rust, and I wanted to do the projects as well. So the first thing that I did, once I've understood the requirement and the gathering, is that I went ahead and asked the AI. I used Perplexity, by the way, Perplexity, for the best design pattern. Now, the design pattern, you can think of it like the flow in your story, right? Now, you see some of the stories, they might start like with a flashback, and then they come to the current point, or they start with the current point and then they go with the flashback, or they might have a timescape. See, all these things are like the flows in the story, and design pattern is something like that as well. All right, you design the entire software so that they follow all the programming principles, and you can add things and remove things later on. All right, so that's why the design pattern is so important. And for me, being a newbie in Rust, I didn't know what kind of design pattern that would be suitable with Rust, because Rust has a very different approach compared to Python and other programming languages. So I spent a lot of time asking what's the design pattern that would be most suitable, and ask it to justify the trade-offs. Every design pattern has a trade-off. All right, so you need to ask it to justify the trade-off, what could be done in the future, what cannot be done in the future, and things like that. So that's the first thing that I always do. And once I'm satisfied with the design pattern, once I go ahead and learn about the design pattern by myself, then I break it down into modules. Okay, so I break down the problem into module. Like for example, now I need to do the finance app. I need to have this calculation module. I need to have this API that fetches the data from that financial platform, and then I need to have the multi-threading needs to be done, because there might be multiple people that comes with their own transactions and things like that. So you have to gather all that different components, break down, and put them as modules, and then you ask AI to verify it. Ask it like, okay, what you have done is correct or not. In most cases, I believe AI should be able to tell you if you have missed something, or if you have done some flaws in your modularities. So you can use that as an assistant, basically. All right, you just use it as an assistant to kind of verify yourself, like a second pair of eyes. All right, so once I done that, then I go ahead and write the code manually first. Okay, and I do it module by module. Like, for example, now the calculation part. All right, I go to the calculation part. I start from the simplest module, by the way. All right, a module that doesn't depend on anything else. Like, for example, you can't straight away go and write the API part, because the API part is just like intermediary between your core logics and also the data that comes in. So you need to write your core logics first. So you write your core logics, and once you have done them module by module, I put it into the AI, the Perplexity, and ask it to see if there's a better way to write the code. All right, and most of the time it teaches me things that I myself don't know. Like, for example, the other day I was I had to go through a huge chunk of array, right? I mean, obviously the first thing that comes to your mind is the for loop. I thought, okay, why not we just use a struct. We call it a struct in Rust. I put it into a struct, and then we gonna for loop into those data. I did it that way, and then when I gave it to the AI said, no, use a better way. Here's another way, dot map. So you can map all those things together. I'm pretty sure this is in all programming language. I wasn't aware how it was used in Rust. So then it showed me this is a better way to do it. Even though I knew about the map, I just didn't think of it at the time. And when I put it into AI and it says to use map, it all just made sense. I was like, oh, wow, why didn't I think of this earlier, right? So AI can be that kind of an assistant for you. Now, another thing that I find really helpful in my projects is logging. All right, now logging is not the same as printing. Logging outputs it to a file, and it does it in a synchronous way that it doesn't disturb your flow of the program. You can go learn more about loggings later on, but for every modules that I write, I put out the loggings. All right, and then once I do the testing by myself, I check the logs to make sure that they are doing what they are supposed to be doing. All right, so that's pretty much how I do the entire software development using AI, right? Again, I figure out the design pattern, I understand the design pattern, and then I break down the modules, I write them manually, I give it to the AI to improve it, make it readable, put comments, all that stuff, and then I implement logging to them, then I test it and check the logs. All right, you go step by step, and then finally doing the bug fixing. So obviously, no matter how careful you are, you're gonna get bugs, that's for sure. So when you found out about the bugs, you want to understand what made the bug happen, and what can you do to avoid it in the future. All right, so to do that, again, don't just simply copy and paste the entire error to your AI and ask it to figure out and then just copy paste the solution. Don't do that. Read the error. You read the error, try to understand to the best of your ability on what's going on. If you can, fix it by yourself. When you really can't fix it, or you don't understand what's going on, like for example, in my case, when the Rust compiler was giving me so much of errors, I didn't understand half of them because I was still new to this language, right? So during the time when I don't understand, I copy paste to the Perplexity and I ask it to explain to me what went wrong. And it will explain to me usually like, okay, you did something wrong in this code, and this is why it's wrong, blah blah blah. And then I copy paste that solution, and if it works, then I go ahead and try to figure out why it didn't work in the first time. Now this kind of practice is what you should implement in your projects when you're using AI. This will help you to become a better engineer very fast. All right. Previously, again, before the AI era, when you are facing with these kind of bugs, you have to go to the internet. You have to go to the Stack Overflow and things like that. You have to find out. And most of the time, yes, you can find a solution. But there are some cases where it's very, very difficult for you to find a solution for them, and you would probably sometimes get stuck in that one problem for few days. You would have to retrace back the steps. You have to probably even go back to the source, the book itself, to see what went wrong. But now with AI, you don't have to wait for days. You can just finish it within like few minutes, all right, even few seconds sometimes. So use that to become a better engineer, all right. Now, let's go with an example, right? It's enough talking for now. So this was a project that I had to do in my previous company, right? I'll just try to summarize to you guys. I was the senior engineer over there, right? And I had like about 5 or 6 juniors under me. And we had this problem where when a project comes, it's been assigned to different people. And all these different people, they were writing codes in their own way, alright? So that makes things very difficult. You can't read the other person's code as easily as you should. And they can't read my code as easily as they should. Even though their code might work, let's say that person goes on a holiday or something and you have to take over the project, it becomes an issue. So what I proposed to my bosses back then was that, okay, let me create a template project, all right? So this ML template, since most of the projects that we have are of the same nature, the only thing that changes is the data set, the model, and maybe some components that you use, we can keep the entire code base similar for all the projects. Now this makes the code consistent across all the projects. If you found a bug in one of the project, that means you fix the bug in all of the project. You can also add improvements to that project, and in such a way that once it becomes a mature code base, everybody can use it as a template, so that the new projects can be done faster with less bugs and with as maximum improvements as possible, right? And it's also transferable. Everybody can read everybody else's code. So that's what I was intending to do back then, and also succeeded in that. And here's the situation, right? The situation is basically I want to keep the code consistent, and I want this project to be extendable later on, and I wanted to know what the design pattern that I can use, right? Again, my knowledge on design pattern is not really that great. There's like a whole lot of design patterns that are out there, and I probably know like 6 or 7 of them. So whatever I know might be either outdated or might not be very suitable. Especially for machine learning, the design patterns are really important, and it's quite difficult to handle them without a design pattern, by the way, right? So this was my situation, and what I did after that is I went to my AI and I did it. So let me just show you guys a little bit. Create a ML template project for my team juniors. And the purpose is to use this template across many projects now and in future. Keep the code readable. Everyone, maybe. This template change the model they are training. Alright, so let's see what it says. So you want to give as much constraint as possible to your AI, and as much information on your objective, so that it can come up with a proper solution, right? Now, it says here use this ports and adapter. It's an hexagonal architecture, which is something that I've been using quite recently. And I think that this is a really good architecture to begin with. But obviously, when the first time you take a look at it, you wouldn't know what is all this stuff. What is it talking about? How does this fit and whatnot? So now what you can do is use this as a reference. Use something else as a reference that you already know to ask it what's the difference, what's the pros and cons, and what's the trade-off of using this. Like for example, I am very familiar with factory design pattern. How is this pattern is different? All right. Alright, so now you can go ahead and read about the difference between this, and you ask more questions to it to learn about this hexagonal architecture, right? So you learn about it. Once you are 100% confident that this is the design pattern that you should go for, now you go ahead and do the rest of the steps that I just told you guys about. But pretty much this is where I always start when I'm starting a project. I always ask it about the design pattern, and then I try to find an alternative design pattern. You can also ask it here itself, what's another alternative for the design pattern, other. So you ask for alternative, and then you try and compare what's the alternative has to offer compared to the hexagonal architecture. See, this is a plugin architecture which I'm not familiar with at all. So now you can go ahead and learn about this pattern a bit and that pattern, and you as the developer, you make the decision on which architecture that you want to go for. Don't just take whatever AI says as the truth. In most cases, it might have misunderstood your situation very wrongly. Maybe the company that I'm working for don't want this big of a project. Maybe they want something smaller, and they want it to be done very fast. But you didn't give this kind of information to the AI, right? And it might have think that you have like an unlimited amount of time, and therefore it gave you a very complex design pattern. And now you're halfway implementing it, and you just realize that it's taking very much longer than what you expected it to be. So these kind of things you have to take into consideration. All right, and for that you have to really fight with the AI to come to an objective truth. Okay, so that's pretty much it. Thank you very much, guys, for listening. And if you guys have any issues or questions, just let me know. I'll give you guys a little bit of time. You can either unmute yourself and ask, or you can just put in the chat as well. I see someone is typing for very long. Gonna be a very long question. Confirm. I agree with Sue, guys. If you guys have any questions about careers, you want some tips, or you're facing some problem, you can also ask me. I'll try to help you. Okay, so we have a question. Hi, I'm Izul. So my current job is data analyst, where my task on around data and Power BI. So I thought I want to switch career to software developer. I have started relearning the fundamentals and will be doing some personal projects for portfolio and of course learning to use the AI too. Problem is I have been depending on AI so much on development. Any comment? Okay, yeah, good question. Um, I know it's a very difficult thing for you to not depend too much on AI. I mean, how could you not, right? The solution is right there. All you have to do is copy paste, and then you get your answer. Um, but just remember that if you do that, that's like taking a shortcut, right? You are not learning anything at all. Sure, yes, you can do your project very fast, but what happens when you come back to that same project 2 months afterward, or you need to make a more complicated project afterward? You're gonna struggle a lot because you don't understand a single thing in that project, right? And here's the thing. Think of it like you want to become a marathon runner, but you are taking a motorbike to the finish line. There's no point in that at all. Sure, you are at the finish line, but at what cost? You have lost so much of time, so much of your personal development, things that you could have been doing to make yourself healthier, stronger, and instead of that, you just let other people run and you're at the finish line, and other people has just become stronger and better because of the efforts that they have put. Now you mentioned that this is your personal projects, right? So you do the things that I just told you about. When you are doing the personal projects, you try to write things as manually as possible until you are stuck. When once you're stuck, then you turn to AI to figure out the solution. And again, don't copy and paste the entire code base to the AI and ask it to improve. You can never keep up. There's like gonna be like thousands of lines over there that it has changed. How are you gonna go and uh, figure out each and every mistakes or each and every changes that it has made, right? So do it module by module. Write one function first, make sure that function works, the input and the output is fine, do some unit testing on it, and if it doesn't work, you use AI. Even if it works, you are happy with it, use AI to improve the code that you have wrote. All right. Just make this as a habit for each and every project that you're doing, and you'll be fine. Hope that answers your question, Zul. No worries. Okay, Sue has a question. I'm curious, since AI used widely, if you use dalam exam, ada macam detector. If you used AI in coding workplace, ada detector. Actually, I don't think so, Sue. Many companies want you to use AI to get their work done faster, and that's why they are trying to reduce the number of workforces. If they are using this detector to detect whether the person is using AI or not, I think it's just a counterproductive for them. They don't care about your personal development. They only need your the result at the end of the day. Hmm. Honestly, I think they encourage people to use AI more than not using it. And if you don't use AI at all, you're gonna be left behind as well. Are there any other questions, guys?
Yes, sir. Hi, hello.
Yes. Hi.
So I'm Asri. So actually, currently before this, I graduate from university and I learn IT and do some programming. But after a few, I think more than 10 years, I left
Okay.
field. I joined retail line.
Okay.
But few years back, I start learning Python, and I keep going what we call do programming every day, but I don't have any where to go, and then I don't know what to do with that
Right.
programming. So I try to solve my current issue problems in retail. For example, I'm working at the petrol station, stesen minyak kan. So I try to solve some problem lah. I learn Python, I learn pandas to solve that issue. So what is your suggest for me to do? What we call what can I do for the future if I actually I don't have any mission any what we call tak tahu nak buat apa dengan apa yang saya belajar tu.
Okay.
Cuma I just use that knowledge to solve my current issue in my workplace. Itu saja. So apa saya dengan sir?
Okay. That's quite a hard question to answer, but I'll try to answer it as best as I can, because it really depends on your life priorities, what your ambition is, and things like that. But I will try my best. All right. So you said you learned Python, tapi you don't know what to do with it, right? So here's what I would suggest. First of all, a little bit of context and understanding. I know there's a lot of false marketing and false expectation and hype around these technologies nowadays, and because of that, people think that, oh, just because I know Python, I can do everything, or just because I know Python, I can do this, I can do. No, not at all. Python is just a language, like what I said earlier. you can learn English, but that doesn't mean you can write poetry. That doesn't mean you can write report, or that doesn't mean you can even write a good story. That requires a different kind of skill set. Learning the language is just the first step on it. Same goes with Python. You can learn Python, but you need a different kind of skill set to do machine learning, to do AI, or to do some financial app, or to do like your retail app or things like that. It's all different thing, although they are using the same programming language. Having said that, I would suggest for you to find exciting projects for yourself that you can relate to. Now, for that, you can actually use AI. I was kind of facing this problem earlier last year, where I was kind of bored with the works that I've been doing in my company, and I wanted something else to explore. And that's when I thought, okay, maybe I should go to the hardware side. I've had some experience with hardware 10 years ago when I was doing internship. We were doing Raspberry Pi, we were doing drones, and I was always wanted to go back to that, but I never had the chance. So I thought, okay, let's see what goes on in today's world. So I used ChatGPT. Back then I was using ChatGPT to put in my frustration, in a nice way, of course. Put in the frustration and ask it what can I do, and I'm interested in this hardware. And then it gave me a list of top 10 things that I could try. From there, I picked one, and then I pulled the string. Like, I asked it more and more questions, and then turns out I found something called swarm robotics. Yeah, so then I was like, okay, this is really cool. So that's one of the reasons why I went and learned Rust programming language, because for robotics you need a lower level programming language. You can't use Python, and I chose Rust because Rust seems like a good alternative, or rather a good programming language by itself. And then I just started to work on it very, very slowly. Until now, I'm still doing Rust, but I just use it for different projects. It's been 1 year plus. I did some swarm robotics projects, but not to the extent that I want. Mainly because I have a day job as well. So that is something I was doing based on my skills and the knowledge and my ambition that I have. I suggest you can try to do something like that as well. Just ask the AI on what are the current topics that are there. Ask it for the latest ones, right? So latest one, and then once you like macam you like one of those suggestion that it give, you go deeper.
No?
Yeah, so you can try that. That's the first step, basically.
I can hear. Go what?
Sorry.
I can hear. Yeah, what you mentioned just now.
Oh, so no, what I said is that once you have that 10 thing, you go deeper into it.
Go deeper into it.
Yeah,
Okay.
like for example, it just mentioned in a passing like swarm robotics or just robotics, and then I pull the string. Like I ask it, okay, what's the current development in swarm robotics? What's the current thing that people are doing? And then you find a use case for something that you like
Okay.
from there.
Okay.
Even in retail, since you like retail, you can try and ask it what are the projects that you can do in retail, and by some chance you might get some unique projects that you have never thought of before, and you might be interested in it.
I see.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
No worries, all the best.
Alright, thank you.
Okay, so we have two more questions. Sue is asking plan for Python. Okay, so is it a good thing to add in resume? Honestly, Sue, I'm not really sure. It really depends on the company. Some company think, okay, let me rephrase that. If you're applying for corporate, by all means put that as a skill set in your resume, because corporate people really love to see those things. And they normally use ATS. ATS is the screening bot that they use to screen your resume. If it sees all these keywords, it might flag you as a positive candidate. But if you're applying for someone like in a startup or someone in a personal way, it's kind of 50-50. The person might appreciate or might not appreciate. You can still, if you want to play safe, put it as one of the skill set that you have, but don't emphasize too much on it. Just put it like that. That's it. Okay, the second question. On past project, I've used VS Code, GitHub Copilot, where it controls my directory. After I prompt it, like an access to whole directory, and also about it. You like the update table thread? Is it better that I don't allow this? And to be honest, they did it as whatever. Okay, so yes, I do know that the AI today can really help you with those things, right? It can really make accurate outcome of what you want. I believe my brother also mentioned that to me. He's a full stack engineer, and he said he was using Codex, and it just did everything that they were doing in 1 week in just 1 hour. So I'm not trying to downplay their ability, the AI's ability. But the thing here is, if you let it do everything like that to your directories, to your database and all that, you will have less and less control. At one point, you're gonna miss what is it actually doing. You're gonna lose track of the things that it's doing. And when that happens, you will hit a ceiling. What I mean by that is, if you're gonna add new features, you're gonna have problem with it. If you're gonna want to remove features, you're gonna have problem with it. So it's better for you to not do that and just update the table structures by yourself. You can even still put it in as a prompt. When there's an error, you can just copy and paste it and ask it, okay, my table is like this and there's an error that's coming out, what's causing it? Now, when you are asking in that way, you are actively learning from it. Okay, you are not simply just becoming a middleman in the transaction. So that's what I would suggest you to do. No worries, so. Alright, any other question, guys? Alright, if there's no any other questions, just a few tips to you guys. Again, when you're learning the programming or learning anything at all, the fundamentals are very, very important. I've interviewed in many different companies before, overseas and local. I've seen the difference between what they expect in local companies and what they expect in the overseas company. In local, they don't necessarily prioritize the fundamentals. They just want to get things done. That's it. They give you a task, they want you to get it done. They don't care whether you understand it or not. They don't care about your career progression. They don't care about your own improvements and so on, right? So that's like a recurring pattern that I found in local companies, especially in corporates. But in overseas company, I'm not trying to say that they are better than us, they are saints or anything like that. No, they also have selfish people. They also want things to get it done, but they would want to prioritize your fundamentals. They would ask questions on why you did certain things this way and why not the other way. Even during the interview itself, they will ask you to explain very complicated stuffs. They will probably ask you to draw the architectures over there itself. They will ask you some very tricky questions to try and get to your fundamentals, things like that. Especially when I was working at that medical company, I learned that they are kind of how do I say this? They are kind of very critical on the stuff that you write, the code, the result, and they will also, even non-technical people will question you on what happens when I do this, what happens when you do that, things like that. Yeah, you're right. It's in local, asalkan everything is good, jalan je, no problem. But again, in overseas also got like that. I'm not saying that they are better or anything like that. It's just my own experience. All right, the few companies that I worked with for overseas were all like that. Perhaps it's the education system that made them like that. I don't know what's the reason, but it is the way they are like that. It is what it is. So to become someone who's going to go into the senior level or the lead level, um, someone who does great things with software, the fundamentals is something that you cannot neglect. Now, this was a problem even back then, before AI. Even before AI itself, people were doing tutorials and everything, and then they were putting in the blog posts, and people just copy paste those tutorials, just change a little bit here and there, and then put it in their GitHub, and then call it a day. And they were saying that, oh, I'm a programmer. So this problem was prominent even before that, and now with AI, it became even worse. People can just easily create a project in just one prompt and then put it in GitHub and say that, yeah, I've done like 100 projects and things like that. So it's kind of, it became harder for you to evaluate someone based on the projects they have done in GitHub. But of course, you can also see other things like the amount of stars that they have, the documentation that they have wrote, and things like that. Even documentation is kind of hard to evaluate nowadays, because you can just use AI to generate the documentation. So none of this now shows how good you are. It doesn't show whether you understand things or not. The only thing that I believe that shows about your fundamental is your during the interview, your communication skill, like terms that you use, the problems that you solve on the spot, and things like that. And of course, also the projects that you have under your belt. And what I mean by that is when you can explain your project inside out. So that's what I would normally ask when I interview people. So let's say someone's applying for a machine learning engineer in my company or whatever. The first thing that I will ask them is about the fundamentals, like what's the difference between this terminology, what's the difference between that terminology. One of the most favorite questions that I like to ask people is, what's the difference between a function and a class? And believe it or not, even people with 15 years, 20 years experience fail that question a lot of time. For machine learning, I most of the time ask them, what's the difference between a convolutional neural network and a multi-layer perceptron? And even that, they fail a lot. Those who really understand what's going on, they have no problem answering that question at all. And I'm not expecting an answer like a Google answer, right? I'm just expecting an answer that shows that you understand the difference between them and what you're doing. And there was a guy who, when during the live interview, it was so obvious that he Googled the answer and he gave me an answer that is Googled, and obviously I didn't pick him. So yeah, the fundamental is very important. There's no way you can forsake that. So that's a challenge, but if you use AI properly, the fundamentals can be learned much faster than without it. So those are the tips that I have for you guys. I'm also quite available in the Discord. So if you guys have any issues, you can always just ring me up.
So sorry for the
Yeah.
last question, maybe Ken.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. What made you are willing to spend your time to share with us about your journey and your career? Can you?
Yeah, sure, I can say that. Well,
Yeah.
it's kind of a selfish reason actually. The thing is, when I'm in this industry, I see a lot of what I believe is the juniors that are up and coming nowadays are going to be the one that write good software, that do good technologies and so on. And if the app that they are creating are shitty, then obviously I can't be using that app as well. So for example, let's say Grab, right? So Grab is written by people of my era, and luckily they were doing a good job, and now I can use the Grab app. But there are a lot of apps that are out there that are just scams. They just use AI to produce those apps, and it's just so depressing to look at. So I just hope that by sharing some of my experience and some of the tips, we get a better generation of programmers, at least by 1% or less than 1%, and that is good enough for me.
Thank you very much. Very appreciate.
No worries at all.
All right.
All right, thank you very much, guys. I'll see you maybe in the next class. Until then, good luck and happy fasting, guys. See you.
thank you so much everyone for dropping by. We're gonna end our session. Kita boleh bersurai, boleh pergi bazar, jom. Okay, alright.